So, Paul Vantomme, let's talk about your biography a little bit. I'm wondering how your life came to this position of the mastermind behind edible insect in the FAO. So how did you start? What was your background of your family and your interests?
Well,
originally?
I'm originally from Belgium. I'm born on a farm, so I've always been quite close on, let's say, the food production.
What kind of farm?
It's a typically mixed small-scale farm with chicken, pigs, cows, a bit of field and things like that. So always quite close to let's say, animal production. Mm-hmm. Of course, not insects at that time. It were mainly pigs and chicken and cows. However, I started to work in Africa, in Mozambique, where we have been doing inventories in the forest. And at that time, that was in the late 70s, it was quite difficult to buy food in Mozambique. So we were actually dependent on whatever we could find of food in the forest. And interestingly, of course, we were allowed to do hunting. There was some big animals, but not always. Once in a while. And actually, we saw that the crew we had with us was actually eating and collecting the caterpillars.
Oh yeah?
And they prepared them. And that was my first exposure to, let's say, caterpillars.
And they wasn't ashamed to...
no, because you didn't have anything else. It was very simple.
Yep.
And it was the season of the caterpillar. I think it must have been a kind of a mopana type of species at that season. Of course, if there was a big antelope, but these antelope were too clever for us, we couldn't make it. And we had a very good cook, and I must say the merit is with the cook.
Yeah.
He knew how to prepare them well. And I think I must say that was my first exposure, and I found it okay. What's the problem? It's a stigmatization from, let's say, Western Europeans who would say, "Bah, we're not going to eat this," because we're actually used to other stuff.
But there were also pest insects of the forest plant you wanted to protect. Wasn't there an interest conflict between your work and the caterpillars?
No, we were doing forest inventory, which is measuring the trees. So we were
measuring.
We were in the forest for two weeks up to 3 weeks. Mm-hmm. And at that time, it was not so that we could buy corned beef or all this. It was not available. So we really had to survive on what was more or less. I mean, there was a little bit, but not too much. So hunting was allowed. We could do some hunting, but that was only, luckily, maybe once a week or something like that. And then you had to eat meat from the morning till the evening. Otherwise, there was no fridge. There was no how to keep it fresh. Had to be eaten almost immediately. But the stuff that really came at that time of the year, reliable, were actually the caterpillars. They just fell off the ground anyway, because they were so fat by eating the leaf. And the people knew how to prepare them.
And how did you react on that?
Well, I must say, first I was not even aware of it, because we were doing we were in a kind of...
And they gave you the meat and they ate the caterpillars, or something like this?
No. We were doing forest inventory work. That means we would start more or less 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. And do a track in the forest, walk and measuring trees, and then come back maybe around 3, 4 o'clock to a base camp. We were a bit tired and finalizing notes and things like that. So I would say dinner would have been ready more or less 6:30, but it was already dim, not fully light. So
and on the way, so your helpers, they collected?
They would collect, particularly if they saw the palm weevil. These they would even take raw. If they saw a tree that was infected, they would immediately go after the big larvae and take it raw like that. Raw is maybe a bit too much.
But you tried it also?
Raw, no, not raw.
This is one of the of the barriers also for us Westerners, I think.
But
to eat it live.
I mean,
in Asia, this is more kind of tradition.
Yes, again, I was not exposed to it. But then they also collected them and they put them on the grill. And that, I must say, was almost like shrimps. And they had a lot of pili pili and a little bit of coconut. the pepperoncini.
Chilies. Yeah.
Chilies, ne? And then they would have this special, because Mozambique had a lot of cocoa.
Yeah, of course.
So they had a kind of an oil with I think it is probably palm oil with some cocoa, and then with pili, and they would marinate the larvae in this and then put on the fire.
Sounds good. I'm hungry.
It was, I must say, it was almost like eating shrimp.
Okay. And how did you make a project out of this? You have not been there because of the insects?
That was in the late 70s. Yeah. That was only because we were forested and doing forest inventory to measure the commercial volume of, let's say, trees, timber.
Yeah.
That has actually nothing to do, but it was an exposure for me.
Yeah.
A daily life exposure that at that time of the year, that was the most common.
And were the host plants of this insect also interesting for you for the forestry thing? Do you remember that? The host plants of the insect?
I think it must have been a kind of a mopane.
Yeah.
There were so many of them. I cannot remember that it would at that time be a threat that the insect would eat a tree. I think unfortunately it was the opposite. People would cut the trees so that actually
to
harvest the wood.
Yeah.
So there would be less trees, less host trees, because of these moths. I think some species have a very specific relation to a host tree species, only to that one. I have no idea what exactly it was there, but it must have been one of these mopane stuff. But later on, when I was in Central Africa, but that was in the 80s, there I had the opportunity to eat more or less the same species, but the one that eats on the sapelli, and then the phragma cylindricum. And according to the people there, they say it's the best one. The caterpillar that has been eating and feeding on the leaves from the sapelli, and then the phragma cylindricum. And I think it's true. We also have the same with the animals we farm.
Yeah.
Depending on the feed we give them, that will flavor also a little bit their meat. So I think it's normal.
Yeah, okay. And they know that the insects from that tree, they are edible, and from another tree...
Exactly.
Problem.
Yes. Because that insect is so closely related with that specific tree, they know that if they harvest under that tree, it's going to be always the same ones. Yeah. And there is no risk for, let's say, maybe unpleasant surprise and things like that. Right. And also we should never forget these people had probably more than 1 million years of empirical knowledge.
Yeah, of course.
Because we all have been insect eaters in our past millions of years.
And then, from that, to the edible insect.
Well, I've been working in this organization on a program which is called Non-Wood Forest Products. That is a kind of a program that looks at the contribution of the wild gathered plants and animals that live in a forest and that contribute to the people's livelihood. Yeah. And there is a lot of stuff, from bamboo to rattan to mushrooms to berries to hunting. And of course, also, that's why the edible insects came into the picture. And because I had some experience in the past, I was actually a bit more open than maybe some of my colleagues. I still remember a colleague of mine, which I said, are you interested? Maybe we can do something like that. And that person was really shocked.
Okay.
Absolutely no way, which I was a bit surprised. So maybe because of that experience earlier in Mozambique and in Central Africa, where I had been eating these caterpillars, that opened up a bit more my mind. And of course, since then, we are already, I would say, 2000. Then the ball kept rolling more and more. So it started from a kind of a livelihood approach. That was the whole beginning. But the contribution of a wild growing species in the forest or in the open areas, which people can gather and that have a significant contribution to livelihoods and nutrition, because it's very nutritious. So that's how it actually, the angle from where I came in.
And then you also had an idea why they actually don't have a protein deficiency when this topic came up, because you know where they have their protein.
Right. We also have to be aware that this is very seasonal.
Yeah, of course.
That's not during the whole year.
Yeah, that's
but it's in some cases it's in the rain season. But that rain season is very difficult because of the many rains, the grass is growing quite tall.
Okay.
So it's difficult to hunt because you
don't see it.
The animal. Or the water base is coming up. So the fish is everywhere, but not in your net because there's too much opportunity. So quite often in the rain season, we see in those type of livelihoods and those type of, I would say, environments, a deficiency in the protein supply.
Okay.
Animal protein, not vegetable, animal protein. Because fishing is difficult because the water is invading everywhere. Hunting is difficult because the grass is too tall.
Now in the Western world, now this report was very widespread in the news. How about it in Africa or in the developing countries, the countries that you aimed for with this project?
This report, yes, has been translated into French, Italian, Chinese. There are a lot of references and summaries. We also have published this in 7 languages. This is a 4-page summary.
Okay.
A 4-page summary of the whole report.
Yeah.
In 8 languages.
We give you the link at the end of the video.
Right. In 8 languages. And I must say that also in Africa, in South America, in Southeast Asia, this report has been widely with academics, with the media, with agencies that are dealing with food security. So yes, there has been, of course, most of the downloads come from, let's say, North America, Europe, and China, Japan.
Okay.
Because we can track from where the downloads come. But significantly also a large part came also from Africa.
Let's talk about the food or feed sector. So I also heard from Arnold Vanhout that he's more at the moment he seems to be more interested in the feed sector than in the food sector. But this is something that I believe is not in compliance with your report that much, because it's about food security should be the priority, and we have the problem with meat production that's using up so much land and resources. So why should we start to produce insects that are so valuable for feed when we can also eat it ourselves?
Yes.
So that I asked a question in the book, if insects are so good, why we should give them chicken? Better we would feed the chicken to the insects.
Sure. I 100% agree with you from an efficiency point of view.
Yeah.
We can eat the insects ourselves.
Yeah.
That's like soybean.
Yeah.
We can eat soy ourselves.
Yeah.
There is no need to provide soy to a chicken and then eat the chicken.
Yeah.
The only loss we're going to have is that we have to provide probably 5 times more vegetable protein in order to produce 1 animal protein. And basically we could have eaten the soy or the corn ourselves. Good. I fully understand that.
I can make it sharper. Is the FAO more interested in feeding their livestock, cattle, ruminants, than to feed the world? I mean, if it goes to producing insects in million tons for the feed industry, this is kind of the wrong way, because the main topic for the FAO should be to feed the people.
Okay, I understand your point, but let's also see the other perspective. Through our agriculture processing, for example, oil palm plantations, agriculture farm processes, food processing, we do generate quite a lot of waste that is not fit for human consumption.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
So we can actually use a lot of, let's call it, agriculture processing waste streams.
Yeah.
Some of them can be used as feed for pigs or chickens, but not always. The pigs and the chickens will be close to where the production of the waste stream is. So we can actually feed insects and have 2 problems solved at the same time. Waste reduction and animal protein production. Okay. If
food production with it,
feed production, right. If, for example, as you're right,
I think that's not the problem. The problem is that, like in Europe now, we have mealworm, cricket, locust. So they are all fed with high protein chicken feed. So what's the difference between a mealworm and a chicken, it's not a big difference, you know.
Well,
so if we start again to produce the edible insects with staple food of humans, so that seems to be in contrast to your work.
I understand your point. There is no efficiency gain to be made.
It's not
when
a difference.
Feeding insects with high grade animal food.
Like in Thailand, 20,000 cricket farms feeding hen.
Yes. However, on the other hand, we can say maybe there are a couple of health issues involved. We know that there is almost no antibiotica or veterinary drugs used for cricket farming. We know that there is quite a lot used in chicken farming. So maybe some consumers are much more concerned about their health and would like to have animal protein, but not animal protein which would have, let's say, veterinary or antibiotic residuals, like with the chicken.
I don't know it, but I hope they do it without antibiotics also.
Okay, I think
as a strategy, you know.
Yes, you're right. However, let's.
I mean, this is a real problem for Thailand because the farmer to produce the crickets, they depend on the feed industry, you know, and the prices of the feed for that. So this is also a limitation of their.
That's true. That's true. We are in a very fast unfolding development where we see a lot of initiatives, and some initiatives, as you said, are a bit not efficient. We would give high-grade chicken feed in order to farm crickets. Well, what's the point? If the cricket still sells for twice the price of your chicken, okay, it's still economically viable. But once that starts to level off, maybe we might go back to chicken. That's true. However, I feel that we're going to see a lot of maturing coming up in the feed for our insects. Most favorably is that waste stream that is not directly available or possible for feeding ourselves or animals. I can give you a nice example. For example, you mentioned the corn belt in the United States where they're doing distilleries for making the ethanol and then selling the ethanol for a fuel. Good. Where they are producing those distilleries, they have huge amount of waste material, which is the corn where actually the ethanol was extracted from. That material is excellent animal feed, excellent, but it's wet. It's wet because of the distillation process. So what can you do with it? You can give it to your cattle, but the transport cost will, as soon as you reach 100, 200, 300 kilometers, it's wet, you're already adding too much transport cost to the process. So what is an opportunity there is very close to these distilleries, and because your waste stream is wet, that they use that as a substrate for black soldier. Because the black soldier needs wet substrate. So this is and at that place there is not enough cattle to bring it to them. So that is a kind of a unique niche where a given waste stream is the best option so far in order to feed an insect, and where we then have a dry insect meal. That dry insect meal can actually be sold at relatively higher price than the waste stream, and can actually be stored and even exported. So that's clever agricultural technique with insects as a transformer.
Right. So you know that I decided to only work for the food sector with insects because every insect that is good for food can also be used as feed for chicken. And what do you think? Does the FAO, I mean, your colleagues from the other sector, from meat production, they are, or fish or whatever, chicken, everybody's looking for feed.
Once again, I would say it's not the FAO that decides, it are the member countries of the FAO that will
but
actually...
in the background also of the member countries is the industry, you know, the agricultural industry.
Sure. But so that is definitely, I mean, I think it's not a competition.
No.
It's not either or, nor or one or the other. No. I think we have a case-by-case scenario where, let me give you another case. For example, Eastern Africa, the lakes around Eastern Africa. Fish meal, imported fish meal is very expensive, and the quality is extremely reliable and reliable. People still want to raise chickens. So how can they have their high-quality protein feed for their chickens if they buying fish feed coming from another ocean and at very high cost and quite unreliable because sometimes the product has been manipulated along it. However, they do have a lot of agricultural waste. They can actually farm insects.
Yeah, that's perfect.
And these insects, if for whatever reason, for example, black soldier fly, I don't think there is a big market for human consumption in black soldier flies, not that I'm aware of, but they can actually use the black soldier fly as an ingredient in the chicken feed and be actually a producer of their own partner, of their own chicken feed. That will reduce the cost for them, the expenditure, the cash expenditure to buy the fish feed, reduce the cost, probably improve the quality of their chickens and actually improve their livelihoods. So I think we have to look at case by cases. In some specific cases, it could be the feed industry that is the leading actor in a specific area. In other parts, it can still be the food. For example, if you look at the 2 billion people for whom eating and gathering insects is still a significant part of their livelihoods. However, this is not an industry, no? This is 2 billion individuals going and gathering. So there is not an industry involved.
They have not so much power in the lobby as the big industry. Yeah?
But they are also to be concerned. I mean, legislation so that they can go to the forest and collect the insects. That should also be. Forest management need to be adjusted. That also gathering insects is part of the forest management restrictions. We should not forget we still have 30% of the whole area of our planet Earth covered with forest. So the forest can still provide a lot of gathering biotope for people to gather insects if they want. So we have areas in the Amazon, in Central Africa, in Southeast Asia, where people do gather a lot of insects, as we can see here on some of these pictures here, like the
rhinoceros people, huh?
It's probably the palm weevil.
No, this is Coleoptera.